G'day. I'd like to demonstrate today how a simple 60-minute a day process guarantees my happiness and therefore can guarantee yours for the rest of your life. Now, I know this is a far-fetched thing. I know the Dalai Lama's spoken about it. I recognize that it's a subject that's been covered in nearly every textbook in the world. But just today, I'd like to show you a process that is simple. I don't want to complicate it. I don't want to make it sound like it's rocket science. I don't even want to say that I invented it. What I did is I went to nature. I went out and met people who live with nature. I met indigenous people from Canada, from Nepal, from Tibet, from India, from Australia, from New Zealand, and I asked, how do we get happy in harmony with nature? And I've packaged this up, and I think I can deliver to you the secrets that have been held, well, rather captive since at least 2,500 years. Once upon a time, everybody knew this. Everybody knew the metaphysics of life. And then, of course, religion came along and packaged it up in ways that made you obedient to somebody else, obedient to guilt, obedient to somebody's approval or forgiveness. And I want to break free of that. I want to allow you to be, internally at least, your best self. And then externally, we can work on what you do with it, as to whether you serve the world, serve yourself, become an actor, a lawyer, a barber, or a train driver, or a footballer, or a cricketer, or a musician, or whatever it is that you choose to be in this world. But I think the first thing to do is get the internal process right. I'd like to take you through a few steps. So my goal for the day, I want to show you how not only to create an awesome awareness, but a great state of happiness at work and at home. Now this means, really, that the idea of work-life balance must go out the door. Because balancing work against life, seriously, we want to be stupid at work and balance it with life so that our partner, our children, our health, our social life, our finances pay the price for stupidity at work. Or do we want to do the other way, work-life balance? So we are ignorant at home, we get into relationships we don't love, into health programs that aren't good for us. We want to get into all sorts of metaphysical or spiritual processes that take us on all sorts of rail rides into the forest and come to work and try to compensate with work and load work with a responsibility to look after us. So at the end of this program, and as a thank you for watching the video, I'd like to link you to a book that I've written called The Spirit of the Mountains. And it's a result of 56 trips to the Himalayas, taking people up to the highest places in the world, using biophilic analysis, which is biophilia is the natural human association with nature, using biophilic analysis to expand people's perception and help them touch their own soul. So I've traveled quite a lot in these. This is a photo of me in Bhutan with some nuns. And now these nuns have been put there not because they're good guys, but because they've gone off the rails somewhere in their life. Somewhere between Tibet, Bhutan, and their family life, they've gone off the rails. They've ended up in a nunnery. And they've ended up quite in heavy circumstances. And we had a laugh that would make you cry. We loved this moment. And this association, this ability to connect with people is a gift of happiness that I even shared with nuns in Buddhism in the Himalayas of Nepal who follow the teachings of the happiest person on earth, in the happiest place on earth. But all I need from you is one thing. I want you to promise that if you watch this video, that if you take it, if I take you through the steps that I'm going to demonstrate in this video, you'll give it a try. You'll come back to me with an email. You'll come back to me with a text and say, Chris, I want to give this a try. There's zero cost for startup. I've taken 100% of the responsibility for the financial burden of this program. All you need to do is say, I will try it for a month. If it works, I'll pay. If it doesn't work, I'll sign out. There's not even a credit card. I don't even know your email address. All you need to do is say, yes, I'm in. You get the free book. You'll get the beautiful photographs from 56 trips in the Himalayas. You'll get some great sage wisdom from the Himalayas of Nepal and Tibet and Bhutan. I've been to all places many, many times. And I'd like to share the wisdom that comes from the happiest places on earth and allow you to bring it to work and influence the lives of millions of people around you. This is my family. So how all this happened is this happy family with my little brother there, the baby on my mother's lap, my older sister, Leslie Gay, who was about 8 years older or 9 years older than me sitting there as a 2.5-year-old, and dear old dad who'd come back from the Second World War, somewhat bruised. And this is a picture taken in our family home. 2 weeks later, my mother had some sort of a depressive incident and left the baby, Kim, left dad, John, and left my sister Leslie Gay behind and took me on a trip. We went on a trip to Victoria, and we were living in Tasmania, and we went on a trip to Victoria. We went to Victoria by a propeller-driven aeroplane. That's how far back this goes. And we arrived in Victoria, in Melbourne, Australia. We took some sort of a car. We drove out to the countryside, many hours from Melbourne, and we stayed on a farm. I have no idea to this day what caused my mother to be in such a depressive state that she would leave a dependent baby behind, but she did. And 3 days later, we were on the farm. The car that we were in went to get the milk with a 17-year-old farmer. We drove down to the gate to pick up the paper or the milk or whatever it was, did a U-turn. My mother fell out of the open-doored car and was crushed to death. This picture is the last picture, a living picture of my mother. And when this happened, my father went into the most terrible trauma. As you can imagine, he'd come back from the Second World War totally committed to building a family. My daughter and my sister had been born before the war. I was born straight after or near after, and my younger brother was right on the table. They'd built their own home by their own hands. My father had a little business as a barber. My mother was a singer and an actor, and everything was going swimmingly in a little place called Devonport in Tasmania, when suddenly she's passed away. She's dead. 2,000 people in a 3,000 village people town of Devonport came to the funeral. Not long after that, my father had us all adopted out. So I was adopted, my brother was adopted, my sister were adopted to all different families. And a year after that, my father, still in grief, unable to face the people of the town, decided to abandon ship, jump ship, and leave the town. He went and stole us back from the people who'd adopted us. One dark night, my father took us all. We all got on a boat. We sailed across the ocean and got to Victoria in Australia. And then somehow went out to a place called Mildura, which at that time was as far into the bush, far into the outback of Australia as you could go. I was surrounded in this time by a grieving father, what I would call an unaccepting sister, a younger brother who was totally dependent, and me. We lived with nothing. We had a petrol station and a shop that sold worms to people who went fishing in the Murray River. Surrounding our house was nearby a river, the Murray River, and Aboriginal people. And over the next 12 months, I became what they called Christopher Sunshine. I became the happiest person on earth. My mother, to me, wasn't dead. She was alive, but only in spirit. My brother was a little angel. My dad, I saw him in trauma. I saw him suffer. My sister went to boarding school, and into the house moved our housekeeper, Helen, who soon was to become my stepmother. Helen had an alcohol problem. Helen had a husband who had passed and left her with a daughter. Helen was struggling. She was an immigrant to Australia from Ireland. and she was struggling. And she said to my father, I can't stay as your housekeeper unless you marry me. So soon Helen, an alcoholic, violent, crazy, grieving, suffering human being, became my stepmother. To my brother, this was love and affection. To me, it was an invasion. To my sister, it was a total unacceptable circumstance. To my dad, it was a necessity. I watched stressed people, and I lived in a stressed environment for the next 17 years of my life. I saw domestic violence, I saw alcoholism, I saw abuse on children, I saw sexual, physical, emotional abuse at all levels. And I survived it. I became a sporting guy. I became a young kid in Melbourne, looking over the back fence with his favourite dog, dreaming of one day becoming a footballer. And I became a bit of a devil. I evolved. One day I went to Nepal, and I started to meet people who were worse off than me. I fell in love with the outdoors once again, taking my beautiful history of living in the outback of Australia and the amazing stories of the Aboriginal people and my friends and my sunshine, and I started to recreate this sense of love and compassion and kindness and beauty in the world. I met amazing people, and they inspired me. They welcomed me into their lives like they welcome no other. And soon I created Inner Wealth. Inner Wealth is born for a purpose. This is a photograph of me with a First Nation Canadian woman in a community where suicide at youth level was epidemic. And somehow, through doing a conference in Mexico, at the age of 35, I was invited to come to Canada from Australia through Mexico to help some Indigenous people resolve their problems. And I started to teach people about living in harmony with nature. And the irony is that these people, the Indigenous people of Canada, were proud of their ability to live in harmony with nature. And it's so easy to think that living in harmony with nature, living from our heart, living with truth, is some form of righteousness, some form of a mental or emotional paradigm that we need to live out and we need to abide by. But it isn't. And I started to teach Indigenous Canadian people about what they already knew from their ancestors, the harmony and the beauty of connection to nature. I did seminars all over the world, working with youth and community groups. I worked with schools. I worked with people who had dysfunction. I worked with corporate groups in seminars. I took people to Nepal. I even created this guy for my first podcast, Tim Boone, who talked like that and was a real comedian. I ended up with a reputation as the spiritual pit bull. Why? Well, a pit bull's not necessarily the most beautiful animal on the world. But when I find the heart and soul of a human being, I let nothing of their ego get in the way of me finding and helping them find their truth. After many years, I ended up in New York. I had 35 people in an office building a multi-million-dollar business. We had a loan for $35 million. We had all the property ready. We had everything ready to launch Real, a global consciousness brand, to take on the world and bring in consciousness as a retail brand and as a retail product. And one day, sitting in my office, this is the picture I took. It took me back into the Himalayas, back to Nepal, to reevaluate, what am I trying to say? What am I trying to teach people? If I've done all these corporate conferences, taught people about living in harmony with nature, and yet an airplane can fly into a building and destroy the lives of thousands of people, what am I trying to do in the world? What am I trying to say? This picture is a picture of a ceremony in the Himalayas of Nepal where my family live, my new family, not my blood family, but my heart family. I became part of a culture which knew about letting go of the past, knew about moving forward with happiness and fulfillment, had the superstition to trust that there is something greater than ourselves in the world, and yet were hardworking enough to say that we don't get things for nothing and we get out what we put in. This beautiful culture re-inspired me to become Chris, the keynote speaker, Chris the life coach in the real world. There are many things that touch me. The eyes of a young child in the most poverty-stricken environment, touching a puppy, feeling the connection to nature, being innocent and honest, is what touches my heart so much. And it brings me back to the concept of happiness. These are monks in a really remote part of Nepal. And we got on so well. And I'm not a monk. I'm not even an educated Buddhist human being. But we have a kindred spirit. And the kindred spirit that I have with people is happiness. The ability to laugh. The ability to enjoy life. And my family is spread throughout the world. And this family is based on the Himalayas of Nepal. I decided at the end of the World Trade Center, at the end of this episode of losing my business in New York, at the end of this episode, to build a better world, one heart at a time. And I'd like to start with yours right now. I wrote a book, and the book was called Sacred Love. Now, why would I write a book called Sacred Love if my mission on earth is to create a better world one heart at a time? And here's my answer. I believe that happiness starts at home. I don't believe that we leave home to get happy. I believe that we must become happy at home in order to take happiness out to the world. I don't believe that any work, sport, trophy, victory, money, achievement, job, income, friend, lover, partner, association, trip, holiday, car, golf club, or whatever it may be. I don't believe any of it makes us happy. I believe we are naturally happy. And I believe that sacred love, the love we want to share with another person, starts within ourselves. I took this book, ironically, this book Sacred Love, to China. They changed the cover. You'll see the cover of the book here. They changed the cover and modernized it. But the book launched in Beijing and became a bestseller written in Mandarin. Throughout China, people were looking for the answers to how to find happiness, but they couched it in the terms of what they knew best, how to build a happy family. I associated with people throughout the world. One of these is a Chinese guard guarding the Great Wall of China, when really my mission was to get to Tibet, which China had occupied and brutalized in some sense. When I talk to my granddaughter, I'm able to say to her, with great wisdom and truth, I know what happiness is. And she looks at me and says, I know you know. My clients know that I know. Whether I'm in Melbourne or New York, my clients know that I know about happiness. I believe that we need to get outdoors and free ourselves up and let go of thinking, to be in environments that push us. I believe that we connect with animal species. I believe that laughter and joy with my son here and health and fitness in the ocean is a great key to being happy. But not all of this journey is about laughter and fun. Here's a picture of my spine. After 56 trips into the Himalayas of Nepal, Bhutan and Tibet, my spine finally gave way. After 5 different surgeries, 3 of them into my spinal column, I ended up with a collapsed spine, unable to walk. And these are the scars that were left. You can see on the MRI images the compression of my spinal column. But the joy of life doesn't run away just because our body starts to collapse. And the love of life and the love of people rebirthed me again. Living alive naturally, I needed to heal once again. My big aha, and that's what I want to share with you today. I defied death. I faced my fears. I overcame my darkness. I used adrenaline. I became a hero. I became a warrior. I became a winner. I also became needy and a victim, and I got rescued. And I learned to withdraw from life into meditation and find a rescuer and be spiritual and reject materiality. I learned to be enlightened, to withdraw, to meditate, to have some sort of superiority, to think that I was better than everybody else, to detach, to be peaceful, to eat mung beans and do backbends. But the result of my first happiness process, I was broke, I was alone, I couldn't tolerate turbulence, mediocrity was okay, I did nothing, I could change nothing, I had an infatuation with living life until the last minute, a suicidal ideology. And for me, life could never be perfect because there was always something to fix. But from this addiction, happiness not a destination. Happiness is a way of life. From making people happy to being happy, I found what it is to turn up in life happy. And that's just the beginning. So I'd done it the hard way, and I don't want you to do it the hard way. It's not necessary to live an experiential life, burn $10 to find out that $10 is burned. The hard way, I'd been doing it for 35 years, going somewhere, doing something, having someone, getting something, being somewhere, thinking something, waiting for someday. I thought that happiness was just around the corner. The problem was I was doing it the hard way. I want to show you the Inner Wealth Power Hour. And this is what I think can change your life as it did for me. It's a 3-step process. Step 1, prevent becoming unhappy. Simply by changing your life process for 30 minutes a day. Step 2, clear away chronic stress before it starts, because chronic stress is cumulative. Step 3, how to deal with energy-sucking life force that might drain your happiness and negatively affect your life. 3 steps. I'll go through them again. How to prevent becoming unhappy, how to clear away stress, and how to deal with energy-sucking life forces. Step 1, how to prevent becoming unhappy simply by changing your life process for 30 minutes a day. I think this is a revolution in the way we self-lead, the way we manage ourselves. The hard way, feel unsatisfied, be ambitious, achieve, 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 feel good about it, be happy. It's called motivation. You'll hear Anthony Robbins, Dr. John Demartini, you'll hear Deepak Chopra, you'll hear all of these people say, what is making you unhappy? If you do this, you will get happy. It's a script. It's a paradigm. If you are a sinner, you come to church, I'll make you an unsinner. I'll forgive you. If you are poor, if you do this, I'll make you happy. This paradigm is in almost a hypnotized mind, stuck in our mind in some way. It's not necessary. There is an easy way. First, get happy. Second, feel good. Third, be ambitious. Fourth, achieve whatever you'd love to achieve. And finally, be thankful for what you've got. Let me just demonstrate. Let's say you spend 80% of your day happy, 10% ambivalent, and 10% unhappy. During the 10% of ambivalent time, you've switched off 99% of the people around you and impacted your success, family, and health. Have you ever been around an unhappy or an ambivalent individual who says, "Oh, I've applied for a job, but I don't really care if I get it," or "I'm doing this contract, but I don't really care if we make a profit," or I'm in this relationship, but I don't really care if it's success or fails." Have you ever met anybody like that, ambivalent, who gets to the middle place, doesn't know whether they want to go backwards or forwards, up or down, left or right? It's awful. This null hypothesis is not living. During the 10% of the unhappy time, you alienate people. So when you're depressed, you might think everybody's attracted to you to give you help. But the people who are attracted to somebody to help them when they're depressed are usually depressed themselves. We always want to fix in others what we need to fix in ourselves. So rescue breeds resentment. So there's a world out there of people who are in let's say, a binding cycle of feeding others depression, feeding others sadness, feeding how sad they are, feeling sorry for themselves. And there's a world out there who are trying to fix it, who want to prevent feeling the same feeling themselves, so they try to fix it in others. What we judge, we breed, attract, or become. So there's this cycle of the fixed and the fixed, those who need to be fixed and those who are the fixers. Both energy sucking. One is sucking energy from the fixer, and the fixer is sucking energy from the need to be fixed. Even if we reduced that 10% by half, we would make a powerful influence on your family life, your health, your work, your career, and actually your life expectancy. Let's talk about it more.